Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Atlanta. A Friday night. In the upscale Buckhead neighborhood, where avenues lined with century-old oaks meet marble facades and manicured gardens, stood an imposing mansion. Its tall windows revealed shards of crystal, glints of gold, and the hushed bustle of a private reception. Inside, the house exuded opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ornately molded ceiling, contemporary artwork hung on the immaculate walls, and polished parquet floors echoed with the soft footsteps of guests. Waiters in black and white liveries circulated between groups, carefully carrying trays laden with sophisticated canapés and glasses of sparkling champagne. That evening, the cream of society had gathered to celebrate a new breakthrough in green technology, a project of which Edward Whitmore, the master of the house, was the principal patron. There was whispered talk of a revolution that could change the face of the world: longer-lasting batteries, renewable energy accessible to all, a greener future. Edward Whitmore, a man in his 60s with carefully styled graying hair, wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Despite his reserved air and legendary discretion, he exuded a calm authority. Widowed for several years, he devoted his life to his businesses and philanthropic commitments, often away from the spotlight. Few knew the man behind the facade, a heart marked by personal regrets and unfulfilled hopes. In the middle of this sumptuous painting, Amara Johnson strode forward with confidence. At 28, she led a double life, a social science student by day, a part-time waitress by night to finance her studies. Her caramel skin stood out elegantly against her black uniform, while her eyes shone with a keen intelligence and unfailing patience. Amara knew her role perfectly. She had learned to remain invisible in these environments where glances sometimes fell upon her with condescension, even contempt. But her rigor and calm had earned the discreet respect of colleagues and even some guests. She knew how to appear professional, never letting her emotions show, even in the face of subtle sarcasm or inappropriate gestures. That evening, she was focused, attentive to the smallest details. The guests were particularly numerous, their conversations mixing ambition, strategy, and sometimes hypocrisy. She felt the electricity in the air. It promised to be a busy evening. Perfectly balanced, a silver platter in her hands, Amara entered the private lounge off the residence, a space reserved for the evening's most influential guests. Unlike the main room, here, the atmosphere was subdued, almost sacred. A discreet fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing glows on the dark woodwork and antique furniture. She was about to place the cups on a low table when his gaze was caught by a detail above the white marble fireplace. An photo frame, barely wider than a hand, placed between an ancient globe and an onyx sculpture. The image was in black and white, slightly yellowed by time. It showed a black girl, about 5 years old, sitting on an old wooden chair, a polka-dot dress falling to her knees, and in her curly hair, a barrette rouge half defeated. Amara froze. His heart clenched violently in his chest. His hands trembled, and a glass of champagne slid onto the tray, narrowly missing toppling over. She managed to catch it just in time, but her mind was reeling. She approached slowly, as if holding her breath. Each step brought her closer to a truth she wasn't ready to face. It was her. There was no doubt. The discreet scare in the chin, remnant of a fall in the courtyard of the home, the more of the dress which she didn't like because it stung a little under the arms, wobbly chiron which she had often eaten alone. It was all there. It was not a resemblance. It was not an illusion. It was his childhood photo, an image that had been taken in a Mississippi foster home, shortly before she was abruptly separated from her siblings and placed in the care of other families. Amara never spoke about that time. It was a broken piece of her past that she had locked away in a mental box, tightly locked. And yet, this box came from open without warning, in a stranger's house. A white millionaire. Powerful. Respected. She took a step back, breathless. A series of questions brutally assaulted her. How did this photo end up there? Why did this man have such an intimate memory of her? Did he know her? Had he looked for her? Had he known her before? And more, why had he never tried to contact her? Her thoughts were a whirl. Her uniform suddenly felt stifling. The room, too silent, seemed to be watching her, surrounding her. Around her, the laughter of guests filtering from the large living room seemed to belong to another world. Instinctively, she placed the tray on a mahogany chest of drawers, silently, and approached the frame, her fingers trembling slightly. Her reflection mingled with that of the little girl in the glass. The distance between the little girl she had been and the woman she had become was narrowing dangerously. She wanted to pick it up, but hesitated. Just touching the image seemed almost sacrilegious. A voice came from behind her. Calm. Deep. Do you know this child? Amara turned around abruptly. Her gaze met that of Edward Whitmore. He stood in the doorway, a cup in his hand, his face marked by a strange emotion. The evening was in full swing, laughter rose, glasses clinked, and the soft music enveloped the room in an almost surreal veil. But for Amara, time seemed suspended, each minute stretching like a fragile thread ready to snap. The weight of the photo, the mystery it represented, never left her. She continued her shift, her professional smile carefully in place, barely concealing the storm within. Every time she met Edward Whitmore's gaze, a shiver ran down her spine, a mixture of apprehension and hope. As the last guests left the mansion, greeting each other with polite smiles and vague promises to meet again, a heavy quiet fell. Amara gave herself a moment. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and headed over to Edward's office, where he was putting his things away in preparation for the end of the evening. Her heart pounding, she knocked softly on the door. Monsieur Whitmore? He looked up at her, surprised but not angry. He gestured for her to come in. Inside, the antique furniture, the shelves laden with rare books, the solemn silence formed a strange setting for what was to follow. Amara stepped forward, clutching the photo she had surreptitiously taken as she looked at it, trembling. Sir, that photo in your living room, that's me. Her voice was low, hesitant, charged with emotions she struggled to control. I don't understand how she ended up there. Edward suddenly blanched, his gaze fixed on the image. For a moment, his face seemed to freeze, as if the weight of years and regrets had suddenly fallen away. He whispered, almost incredulously. It's not possible. You're alive? The silence that followed was icy, heavy with everything that had never been said. In that room, between those walls laden with memories, time seemed to stand still. Amara felt her breath catch. Her heart, heavy with questions, doubts, and fears, was pounding. Who are you to have this picture? She finally dared, her voice more assured. Edward slowly looked up at her, a glint in his eyes that was both painful and hopeful. I searched for a long time, without ever knowing if you were still there. Sitting behind his large mahogany desk, Edward Whitmore gestured for Amara to sit opposite him. The atmosphere, thick with suppressed emotion, seemed to tighten around them. He took a deep breath, as if to gather long-buried memories, words he had never shared, even with his closest colleagues or his lawyers. Almost 30 years ago, he began, his voice low and trembling, my wife, Margaret, and I decided to expand our family. He gave a faint, nostalgic smile, then his eyes darkened. We set out to adopt a little black girl, abandoned in a shelter in Mississippi. Amara felt her heart tighten, its beating quickening. We had seen her photo, he continued, but nothing could prepare us for what we felt when we met her. Her lively eyes, that glimmer of intelligence, and above all, her ability to laugh, even in the midst of so much pain. There was something extraordinary about her, something that immediately connected us to her. He looked at Amara, as if to make sure she understood the depth of what he was saying. But life is sometimes cruel. Shortly after the adoption process began, a political scandal erupted involving my wife. An affair that destroyed our reputation and put an end to all our efforts. Edward looked down, pain showing on his face. The adoption was abruptly cancelled, without any explanation. And the girl was placed elsewhere, without us being notified. A heavy silence fell. Amara, her hands clasped in her lap, struggled to hold back the tears. She saw fragmented flashbacks of her childhood, the blurred faces, the sense of abandonment. "I never stopped looking for her," Edward murmured. "I hired private investigators, went through hundreds of files, followed leads, but everything seemed to be lost in silence." He opened a drawer and took out a yellowed envelope, which he handed to Amara. "It's the only thing I've kept as a souvenir, that photo, that silent promise to never forget it." Amara took the envelope, her trembling fingers brushing the paper. She read in a low voice. "Lila." The name echoed in her like a clap of thunder. It was her first name. The name she had been given at birth, before being separated from her siblings and renamed in her foster home. A first name she hadn't heard since she was 5. She felt her legs weaken. Emotion overwhelmed her, a mixture of astonishment, anger, and hope. "Your name was Lila then, wasn't it?" Edward repeated gently, seeking confirmation. Tears finally rolled down Amara's cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. Their destinies, long separated, had just been reconnected by this lost first name, fragile like a golden thread. The weeks following the revelation were a whirlwind of conflicting feelings and profound upheaval for Amara. First, there were the tests ADN, this scientific evidence that sealed a long-ignored truth. The results came in, relentless and incontestable. The link was there, tangible, no biological filiation, but a connection stronger than blood, that of a man who, decades ago, had done everything to welcome her, to protect her. It was a shock to Amara. She had long believed her roots were lost forever, that her family had dissolved into oblivion. But now she knew it was all a complex puzzle, a story intertwined with power, injustice, and regret. Digging deeper, using the contacts and resources Edward placed at her disposal, Amara made a chilling discovery. Her separation from his brothers and sisters was not trivial. The social services responsible for their placement had been infiltrated by corruption and personal interests. Falsified files, arbitrary decisions, preferential adoptions had destroyed what should have been a united family. This truth shocked her. But it also gave her a reason to fight. Edward, on the other hand, was consumed by guilt. He had lived with this burden for years, blaming himself for not having been able to protect her, for not having managed to keep her close to him. Yet he made no attempt to bribe her or persuade her with money. On the contrary, he offered him what really mattered: time, space to rebuild, and concrete resources. "Amara," he had told him one day, "I can't erase the past, nor give you back what was stolen from you. But I want to help you find your roots, complete your studies, and rebuild your life on your own terms. I want you to be free and independent." For Amara, this proposal was both an outstretched hand and a challenge. She accepted, but with one clear condition. "I want to keep my independence. No debt, no ties. I want to move forward on my terms, not yours." It was a tacit pact, based on mutual respect. In the months that followed, Amara began a slow process of rebuilding. She resumed her classes with new financial and moral support. She searched for, found, and contacted her brothers and sisters, each carrying their own wounds, their own silences. Together, they began to mend the torn bonds. This period was also a trial, a winding path between anger and forgiveness, pain and hope. But at every step, Edward was there, discreet, ready to support without ever imposing, to listen without ever judging. 2 years had passed since the night Amara discovered the photo that changed the course of her life. 2 years of inner struggle, reunion, learning, and above all, transformation. That day, in a bright cultural center in the heart of Atlanta, Amara Johnson, now a social work graduate with honors, was preparing to officially inaugurate her own organization, Roots Found, an association dedicated to the reunification of children placed in homes, the protection of the rights of vulnerable families, and the fight against abuse and corruption in social services. The room was packed. Social workers, adoptive families, activists, lawyers, and journalists had come to listen to the young woman whose exceptional journey had become a symbol of hope and justice. On stage, dressed in a sober but elegant suit, Amara felt her gaze meet that of Edward Whitmore, sitting in the front row, his eyes shining with emotion. The latter, although discreet, had come to support this woman whom he had helped to find a fragment of her identity. When Amara spoke, her clear voice echoed in the attentive silence. "I don't believe that blood makes a family." She paused, letting her words permeate the room. "But I believe that some encounters are written somewhere, in a destiny that we do not always control." Her gaze wandered for a moment towards the ceiling, then she continued forcefully. "And that it is never too late to repair, to rebuild, to offer a second chance." The applause erupted, powerful and sincere. In the crowd, Edward felt a lump form in his throat. Memories of years past, of regrets, of hopes dashed and rekindled, came flooding back to him. Without thinking, he stood up, his face clouded with tears that he made no attempt to hide. Her gesture was contagious. Little by little, the entire room rose to applaud not only Amara, but also this fight against injustice and for human dignity. This ovation was a victory, not only personal, but collective. A promise for the future. After the ceremony, Amara joined Edward. They exchanged a knowing smile, heavy with everything they had been through. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a reason to hope," he replied. At that precise moment, they knew that their story, born in pain and silence, would continue to write new chapters, bringing light.